say? Nobody doing it better. Y'all some lightweights. Malik Wright, up all day and all night, pushing all the buttons up to something till it's alright. He looking at it from all sides and angles. Got a stripes on his body like he played for the Bengals. Oh man, there's no one discussing it. They came, they stayed, they either did it or done it. Man, I love it, cause all they ever do is win. So kick back, relax, the team.
For tuning in to another special edition of the Sit Down with Malik Wright, presented by my company, The Right Way Sports Network. I'm your host, Malik Wright, joined as always by my co-host, who's acting as the producer today because, of course, we knew some news was going to happen, and it has happened. Ja'marr Chase, Tee Higgins are now officially under contract with the Cincinnati Bengals for the foreseeable future. The Bengals got the deal done a little earlier today, but it was something they were working through over the weekend. I know a lot of people can breathe a sigh of relief. A lot of people are happy with those results. Daniel, man, I thought we would be going live. Honestly, man, I thought we'd be going live early in the morning. Honestly, I thought we'd be going live at around 8 a.m. or something like that. But here we are. We're going live now. We're talking this thing through. The Bengals finally get these deals done. And let me just say something similar that I just said when I was on a show earlier, which was with Drew and Ron, the Cincy Unfiltered show. I talked about how this has to be an uncomfortable moment for the Cincinnati Bengals. It's got to be. They never shelled out this much money. They haven't shelled us out this much guarantees and guarantee beyond year one. This was an uncomfortable moment. The holdup for Tee Higgins always was the guarantees in the contract, but they get the deal done, Daniel. They get the deal done. They sign Ja'marr Chase, Tee Higgins, and they keep the big three together. Now the conversation, the focus now pivots to Trey Hendrickson. It pivots to, can they get the deal done with Trey Hendrickson? We know they came in with a small offer to Trey for $23 million, right? When we saw the market boom the way it did, and these guys are getting paid 40 million a year. Trey Hendrickson is like, okay, well, what about me? Where's my cut? And he went out there, he seeked what his value was. Teams were willing to give him the contract extension, but weren't willing to pay the Bengals the compensation to acquire Trey Hendrickson. So now he's back at the table with the Bengals. Now we have to figure out what that's going to look like going forward. But before we even talk about Trey, let's keep talking about Ja'marr Chase, Tee Higgins under contract. Daniel, I want to hear your thoughts on this move, on this deal. Where's your excitement rank with everything?
Man, I'm pumped up. And I think this has been a very up and down offseason, I'll say, right? And if we date back to, this past season, there was points where we're debating and saying, man, is Tee Higgins going to be a Cincinnati Bengal? Once again, we appreciate everybody in the chat. If you guys want to drop your opinion, drop your comments down below. Man, you've got to be excited, right? Because, there's people on the outside, other fans saying, it's not going to work. Paying 3 offensive guys this much of the cap is not going to work. You guys as fans have and should take this time to be excited, right? Because this could have gone the exact opposite way. This could have been another Jesse Bates situation. This could have been another DJ Reader. This could have been another, guys that just have performed, but just haven't been back in a Bengals uniform. And you got Tee Higgins and Ja'marr Chase locked up, right? So on the Ja'marr Chase front, it seemed like this was always going to happen, right? It would have been a colossal F up if they didn't re-sign Ja'marr Chase. But talking about Tee Higgins, let's talk about him as a player first off. There's debates. Is he a number 1 wide receiver? Is he a number 2? The beautiful thing about this conversation, Malik, is it does not matter if he's a number 1 elsewhere. It matters what does he do on this football team. And God damn it, this dude is an elite football player. The biggest concern with him is the health. Is this dude going to stay healthy, right? Can he be active for 90%, 80%, 75% of the games in a season? But when you have Ja'Marr on the field, when you have Tee Higgins on the field, when you have Mike Gesicki on the field, when you have Joe Burrow on the field, this is a top 3 offense undoubtedly. So from a pure football standpoint, when these two guys are together on the field with Joe Burrow, it's pretty damn unstoppable. So Tee Higgins, you have to be excited that you locked him up, right? And for the people who are doubting this, for the people that aren't so happy about this, you didn't have to pay $32 million. You didn't have to pay $33 million for Tee Higgins. You're getting a star wide receiver for around $28 million a year. So Tee Higgins, you just have to be excited about having these two locked in, because you don't have to worry about the replacement value. You don't have to worry about, does Matthew Golden pan out? You don't have to worry about, is Andre Yoshivas going to step in? You don't have to worry about these. And you check one question off of the question mark list when it comes to the NFL offseason. So, man, you have to be happy. And this is a time for Bengals fans to be excited for the future. And the thing I'm going to say, to the point that you can't pay 3 offensive players this much percent of the cap. When have we seen a team like this, right? When have we seen 2 wide receivers like this? When have we seen them combined with arguably the best quarterback in football? When I look at what happened last season, Malik, and we can point to the defense, I'm confident as long as Joe Burrow's on the field, and now that you got Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins, you're going to be in the dance. And you're going to have a puncher's chance. And the question is, right, how do you build around this team? So now as we look at it, I still don't think that this plagues you from going out and signing other guys. I still don't think this plagues you from building other places on your team, right? When you look at having 2 star wide receivers, it opens up a lot, to be honest, with your offense. You don't have to go out there and draft a running back high. You don't have to go out there and worry about who's your wide receiver 3. You don't have to address the receiver position anymore. So Tee Higgins, Ja'Marr Chase, it settles a huge question mark, because this Tee Higgins drama was going on for a long time, man. And it was, do we get a wide receiver 1? What's the replacement value? So we can finally put those questions to rest. We can finally stop the Tee Higgins trade conversation, because now this dude is on the team. So as it stands, you've got one position checked off. You've got arguably the 2 best wide receiver duo in the entire NFL. And that's something you have to be excited about. Regardless of what the price is, you've got to be excited about that. And this pretty much locks you in, respectfully, for a top 5 offense every single year and every single time that these guys step on the field. So, man, I'm excited about this. I think this is a huge, huge accomplishment. Also, when you look at the Bengals, this could be them turning over a new leaf, right? It seemed like there was a chance that they could say, hey, we don't want to pay Tee Higgins. Let's just go out there and trade him, and let's keep our same old mantra going. But this may be them turning a new leaf. So it's something you've got to be excited for. And like I said, I don't necessarily want to jump straight into the Trey Henderson conversation, but this makes life a whole lot easier, because it's one less question mark about who is going to be your next wide receiver. You got them locked up. You have to be excited about that.
It makes it interesting. Yes. Easier is one way to put it, which I agree with you for the offensive side of things, but there is still a glaring hole on the defense. But before we jump into that, I just want to say, you look around the league, there was a collusion going on amongst teams, fans, reporters that were banging the table saying the Bengals have to move on from Tee Higgins. The Bengals have to let Tee Higgins be free. That was the conversation. And I was very ashamed to see that rhetoric being spewed by so many people who I have a lot of respect for. And I think a lot of people were taking that stance because maybe they didn't want Cincinnati to be competitive. But this brings me back to the same old conversation I always have. I think that Cincinnati, the good times Cincinnati are ahead of them. That's what I'll say. I think good times Cincinnati are ahead of them. I think that they have the opportunity to really do something special with this crop. And just to see them defy all the words that might have been said about them and really stick to their guns, albeit with a little pressure from your franchise quarterback, because I don't think the deal gets done without Joe Burrow. Yes. I think it says a lot about them that they were able to get the deal done. For some reason, they wanted the band to break up. The most entertaining show in the NFL continues, and they kept Mike Gesicki as well. So this offense, right? This offense that we saw rolling last season is an offense that we can continue to see. Here's something that's interesting about Tee Higgins' contract, Daniel. Tee Higgins has the ability to make 30 million with incentives built in. I've got to think those incentives are health playing, right? Because those are things that have kind of plagued T. Higgins throughout his career at Cincinnati. And one has to think, would he be more likely to play a game or two if he was dealing with an ailment or something like that? That maybe he wasn't 100% now that he has that long-term guarantee kind of wrapped up. You think about it though. I think that this is a huge move for the Bengals. It's an uncomfortable move for the Bengals because something they haven't done before, and it puts them in a situation in which they have to finally modernize and operate like a modern NFL franchise, which is all good signs. The cap is going up. It's 2025. Money that was money in 1995 isn't money that's money in 2025. The guarantees are different. It looks different. Yes, 100%, Gary Jellison. I want to say props to James for being the one to fully put his nuts on the table and say, deal done. And Jordan Schultz being the one to actually put the information out there. I always root for guys who break through that insider glass, if you will, and finally break news. I'm very, very happy for them, very excited for them. That all being said, it's a good time for Cincinnati. They defied a lot of people who thought that maybe they wouldn't get this done or maybe they weren't serious enough about it. Now the focus shifts to the real stuff, Daniel. The meat and potatoes, the unsexy thing, right? Understand, Bengals fans, understand people. The Bengals gave Bengal fans alike what they wanted. They gave them Tee Higgins. They gave them Ja'Marr Chase. They gave them Mike Gesicki. Now, Bengals, you changed your stripes in that regard. Are you now going to change your stripes when it comes to guaranteeing and actually paying premium for an offensive line position? Are you tired of your quarterback, albeit he threw the most touchdown passes in the NFL last year, the most passing yards in the NFL last year? He was also the most hit quarterback in the National Football League last year. Are you ready to see that guy upright? Clearly, the moves that you made, right, where you bench Cordell Volson, sorry. You bench Cordell Volson. You released Alex Kappa. The moves signify that you realize we have to get better at the guard spot. I will keep pounding the table for guard. I will keep pounding the table for pass rush just because you bring back Joseph Osai, who had 5.5 sacks, last 7 games of the season, and you brought back Cam Sample, who tore his Achilles. That does not fix the pass rush issue. Even if Trey Hendrickson is back in the fold, as I expect him to be, that does not fix the pass rush issue. You still have to go out there and say, hey, the same interest we had in a guy like Azeez Ojulari in the middle of the season at the trade deadline, we should still have that same interest in him or someone to get better now. Ask yourself, why did we have that interest in him? Could it be because we weren't getting enough from the other guys? And listen, I'm all for banking on potential. I'm all for guys living up, outliving the expectation of what you may have had for them going into the season. I'm all for Myles Murphy breaking through. I'm all for Joseph Osai breaking through. I'm all for Cam Sample having a good year. I'm all for all that. I'm even all for a draft pick going there. But look at the Eagles model and how they build the defensive line from a watered down perspective. They keep adding pass rushers. You can never have enough pass rushers. So if I'm the Cincinnati Bengals, I'm attacking this pass rush department because what we put on the football field last year was not good enough. From a guard standpoint, was not good enough. These are now decisions that you have to make. With you signing Ja'Marr Chase, right, and Tee Higgins, it brings the cap down for what it would have been this year. So you have more money to play with. There's still the question mark of Jermaine Pratt. There's still the question mark of Zach Moss, right? There's still so many question marks that that the Bengals, this Bengals team, have to answer. Danny, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, man. I think that there's a couple points that you really brought up. The first thing I want to kind of go back to real quick, Joe Burrow is a huge reason for this. And I think the Bengals didn't F this up. Like, you very well could have messed this up, right? How rare is it that a team gets a franchise quarterback like Joe Burrow, right? This is a 5 out of 32 teams have a Joe Burrow type quarterback. So for the Bengals to come out and extend their window and actually listen to what the franchise quarterback wants, they're changing the stripes. And that's the first thing I applaud them for. And you also have to applaud Joe Burrow for being that franchise guy and really helping them change their ways. So shout out to Joe Burrow for that. But when you look at how this affects the rest of the team and what they can do, I've seen people say this team is in cap hell. They're not in cap hell. They're not. Who are they paying? This was the conversation we had last year. You look at 3-4 guys at most that were in double figures. One of those guys was Sheldon Rankins. So let's not put this notion out there that this team is in cap hell, because they're not, right? So when you shift your attention, how do you get better? Malik, you brought it up. You have to hit on your draft picks. And that's why when you go to the change of paying your star players like T, Ja'Marr, Joe Burrow, and potentially Trey, it makes it that much more valuable that you hit on your draft picks. So my mind goes to two things. First off, your previous draft picks. Dax Hill, Miles Murphy. Those are guys, Chris Jenkins, McKinley Jackson. These are guys that I'm looking at saying, hey, DJ Turner, we drafted you, coaching staff. It's up to you to get them ready and ready to play, right? The Philadelphia Eagles are okay with letting Milton Williams go. They're okay with letting Josh Sweat go because they have guys in the wing. Darius Slay, James Bradbury gone because they just drafted, 2 stud corners. So the Cincinnati Bengals, it puts a lot of pressure on them to draft, but these are the names: Miles Murphy, Joseph Osai, Dax Hill. If these guys can step up and turn into quality role players and high upside guys, this team looks a lot different, right? We're not just banking on potential. Those guys turn into quality role players. We're looking at guys that aren't getting paid a whole lot yet and succeeding on their rookie contract. So the notion that this team and their defense just is putrid, I don't buy that, because you have to rely on these guys. They put themselves in the situation where you can't go out there and sign 2-star passers. You can't go out there and sign, a star safety, because what's your next priority? It's into your offensive line. So if you go devote some, allocate some money to signing a Jenkins and a Tristan Colon, adding, 2 interior offensive linemen, that puts you in a situation where you're going to spend premium draft capital on pass rushers, and you have to hit on the draft pick. So, Malik, like I said, this turns my attention to the interior offensive line. The Alex Kappa news makes it pretty much a foregone conclusion. You'd hope that they have to attack that position. So for me, when I look at free agency and what has to be next, go out there, get one of these top-end interior offensive linemen, and maybe add some guy, somebody at the pass rush department. That's kind of what I'm looking at. But the rest of the roster kind of looks like what we're going to see in the regular season. Maybe they add a veteran at quarterback, but my checklist for the Bengals for the rest of the offseason is go get 2 interior offensive linemen, maybe add 1 more pass rusher, and maybe a depth piece at the cornerback position, and turn your eyes to the draft. So, like I said, I'm excited to see what this does for the team, and you hope that the interior offensive line is the priority. And if that is, turn your eyes to the draft, and we'll see who they end up with. So,
no, it's not over yet. The fun begins now.
Oh, for sure.
For agency, the fun begins now.
Yeah.
You wrapped up these deals. You get Trey Hendrickson's situation figured out. The fun begins now.
Yeah.
The conversations start now, right? About now adding depth. This is now your wave of free agency where the Bengals sort of like to attack. We're entering into that part of the offseason. I believe they made one of the biggest signings in free agency history, right? They made one of the biggest signings of free agency history on the 20th of March in Orlando Brown Jr., right? Where they showed out the most guaranteed money to a free agent. So this is the waters on which the Bengals play now. I expect the Bengals now to be active, extremely active this week. What does that look like? We will find out. Who do they add? We will find out. But they know that they need to fix the defense. They know that they need to get more pass rush help. Now, that pass rush help could come from the draft. Listen, we are going to be live. We owe you guys. And to be honest with you, we didn't do our free agency show on Friday because I was expecting this deal to get done, and I didn't want to have to do live back to back to back. But we owe you guys a longer show. So we are going to try to answer as many questions today as possible and be as in tune with things as possible. We appreciate you as well. Daniel just rushed back from the gym. I got my workout in a little earlier. I was talking to Drew Garrison on the phone, and we were just chopping up about this. But we've got almost 340 people watching us live and only 52 likes. We don't do super chat or anything like that. The only thing we ask is that you guys give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if this is your first time here. If you've been here, turn on post notifications so you guys never miss when we go live or when we upload content from the TWSN studios. Daniel, now the focus can get shifted onto actually fixing things. The press conference is going to be awesome. It's always awesome to see the Bengals fall back on their old mantra: draft, develop, and retain. Draft, develop, and retain. This is a motto that they sort of went by a couple years ago. They kind of gone back from that, but we were talking about it just not too long ago, Daniel. You know, there was a point in time where the Bengals used to be ahead and get ahead on these contracts. Maybe this will help them. Maybe they will have learned from this situation, right? And they'll say, hey, you know what? We need to start extending guys a year before they play on their final year. Like if Dax Hill bounces back from this ACL injury and he looks good at corner, I'd extend him this upcoming offseason. That's what I would do, right? Not this offseason, but the following upcoming offseason. Or even if you want to negotiate at some point in the season, I would try to get that nipped in the bud. The reason being is because it only becomes more costly. If you see a guy and he looks like he could potentially be something and he's a good draft pick, wrap these contracts up now, right? It's only going to help you in the long run. It's only going to be even cheaper for you, and you buy yourself some more time. So before those deals even kick in, you already have these guys under contract. Hopefully this is a situation, Daniel, in which the Bengals have learned, hey, you know what? We need to do everything in our power to make sure that we need to retain the talent that we draft. Get ahead on it easy. You knew what Jesse Bates was. There's no reason why Jesse Bates is not a Bengal anymore. But I digress. He's not a Bengal. The fact of the matter is, use that situation as a learning experience. It's something that they used to do often. It's now time to get back to that. It's time to get back to that. Why is adding a guard? Let's talk about why adding some of these positions are super important, because I don't want people to ever think that we jump on this show and, we just say things and, we don't have a reasoning behind it. The reason why I would like for the Bengals to add a guard or two, it will give them more flexibility in the draft, right? The one thing I don't want is I don't want the Bengals to go into the draft and say, oh, damn, we're in the second round. We've got a really, really good defensive player who we know won't be in the third round staring at us. But there's a chance for us to draft Tate Ratledge, who I have some questions about too. I don't want them to pigeonhole themselves in the draft process. I'm always a fan of drafting a guard, but I also think if they can get ahead of it, they should get ahead of it. By doing that, if you add a guard, you enter free agency, you enter the draft with your board wide open. I was telling Daniel this, guys, and this sounds a little crazy. If the Bengals were to add another edge rusher, hear me out. If the Bengals were to add another edge rusher, Daniel, and the Bengals were to add two guards, let's say, not even two guards, let's say an edge rusher in free agency. Is it fair to say offense could very sneaky open up for the first round? Hear me out.
Yeah.
Because think about it. You could only have so many spots. Obviously, you need somebody to replace the Sam Hubbard snaps. Sam Hubbard's now retired, right? You need somebody to come in here and replace those snaps. If you add an Azeez Ojulari and you already have this guy or that guy still in the fold, like Joseph Osai, Cam Sample, Trey Hendrickson, Miles Murphy, you now have a lot of guys already at the defensive end position. If you add another pass rusher, a guy that you feel good about, it allows you to open things up a little bit more. I'm not saying the Bengals should do that, but I think it makes life much easier. And I don't think you're reaching for guys or reaching for need. You draft best player available. That is how the draft should work. Draft best player available, right? What are your thoughts on that, Daniel?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of drafting best player available. When I look at the draft, the issue with switching it over to the offense is I just don't know where they would go, right? I think it's a valuable discussion to have, right? Like, these wide receivers, I'm good. Like, the only one I like is Ted McMillan, personally, at that spot at 17. Tight end is interesting. I personally don't know if I'd feel confident passing on the rest of these guys at edge rusher, at interior defense line, for a Colson Loveland at 17 when I could get Gunnar Helm later. But it does open up the possibility for, hey, maybe they do want to invest on the offensive line and get one of these top end guys. Once again, I think there's better depth in round 2, but you have to have these guys in your consideration as the Bengals are going through the process. You cannot get any of these guys just off your board because it's round 1. Like the conversation that was happening beforehand, and I don't think he's going to be here anymore, but Ashton Genty, right? Obviously, the Bengals are a pass-heavy offense and passing 58% of the time. But the conversation of if Genty is on the board, what do you do? I agree with you, Malik. You have to consider all these options. But when I look at it, like I said, I think that the best player available will be on the defense. But I also think that there's a world, and this personally, I think there's a world where you could trade back. And it depends on who's on the board, but I wouldn't rule that out, right? Everything has to be on the table, especially after signing T. Higgins and potentially if they get a Trey Hendrickson deal done. So when we look at the draft, especially in round 1, I think that the value is going to be on the defensive line, but there's so many of these guys. I think the one issue, Malik, is going to be like if a Will Johnson falls. He's the one guy. If a Will Johnson or Malachi Starks fall, if I were to predict right now, those are the 2 players that I think could turn the Bengals' heads from going on the defensive line. I don't know if these offensive linemen would turn the Bengals' head. I don't know if Colson Leveland would turn the Bengals' head. I think, an Ashton Genty may, but I think it's Starks or Will Johnson. Those are the 2 guys that I would say when we look at the defensive line. If they were to add an Azeez Ojulari or if they were to add somebody else in free agency. But I think that just looking at this draft and especially where round 1 is shaping up to be, I think if these guys like James Pierce, Mike Green, those are the 2 pass rushers that are on the board, I think that would be well worth the selection. But there's going to be guys on the board that they may like. They may like Mykel Williams. Shamar Stewart may fall. Walter Nolan could be there. So it's going to be a fun conversation. I think that they're going to have their pick at defensive line. Like I said, if I think there's one player that could turn their head, yeah, I think it could be Malachi Starks. And Starks is a guy that, like I said, we both, you mentioned it on the mock draft. There are kind of some concerns with him, but he's a guy that I think that they would love. 5-star athlete, a guy who can play, both safety positions, can play nickelback, comes from a top tier program, has had success, is a team captain. So he's the one guy that I would say that if I would predict, not what I would want to do, but what the Bengals could do, I think it could be Malachi Starks. But just one other thing. I mean, just going to the defensive line and looking at a Trey Hendrickson, I see a lot of people are asking. I think you have to keep him on the team. And obviously there's contract negotiations, and obviously he is under contract for this season. But I think just looking at the defense, I think the Bengals would really regret not having him on the team this season. Whether that results in him, it is a result of him wanting out, if that's a result of him asking for a trade because they don't give him an extension. I think that this team is so much better with Trey Hendrickson on this team. And if they were to get an extension done, I think it just helps ease so much of your pain, because somebody even, posed the question or made the statement that this Bengals defense was not the same at the end of the season. That was not the same defense we saw throughout the season, albeit they did play some poor teams, right? But you can't tell me a Bengals defense without Trey Hendrickson is better than what we had. So I think that this group is really starting to come together, but I think that they would set themselves back if Trey Hendrickson is not on the Bengals. So I know I went kind of all over the place, and
it's you were fine. You gave me a chance to adjust over here. My eyes starting to bother me a little bit, but I listen, this was a huge move for them, man. But I want to start talking about some of these free agents, Daniel, that are available. Daniel, I don't mean to keep putting you on the spot here.
No,
I apologize, man, but let's get to some of these free agents that are still available. When you look at the list of free agents, right? We know where the needs are, right? At the guard spot. I don't expect them to go back into the waters of defensive tackle, if you will, but I do think that there is a world in which they could get better. Obviously at the guard spot, but also at the edge rusher spot. Who is a name that speaks volumes to you? Who's a name that you're looking at and you're like, the Bengals would be good to add this person and it would help them in the long run?
Or defensive line or in
whoever.
Yeah, I think that just looking at the offensive line is one where it remains to be seen who's going to be the guy that they end up taking. Obviously, the top tier is the, Tevin Jenkins, is the Brandon Scherf, is the Dalton Rice. And those are the guys that I'm really, a fan of. But if they do want to add another piece, and I know I've mentioned this name before, but Tristan Colon from the Arizona Cardinals. He played with the Baltimore Ravens. He's a guy I think perfectly fits what the Bengals want to do. They want versatility. And this is a guy that you immediately bring in, and he competes with Cordell Volson for the starting job. He's the guy, he won, the starting job for the Arizona Cardinals. He's played the center position. He's played left guard for the Baltimore Ravens his first 3 years. He's played right guard for the Arizona Cardinals.
Mhm.
So he's a depth piece where we're looking at, you're spending $3 million on this guy. And he's a guy where I envision him coming over and taking Cordell Volson's spot. So he's not my immediate guy, but he's a guy where you look at the Cardinals, everything is about Will Hernandez right now. And there's rumors that he was in Detroit. He's friends with Roy Lopez. He was in Detroit, apparently. The Detroit Lions may like him. Everybody's talking about Will Hernandez, and yes, he deservedly so, but I thought Tristan Colon performed way better than what Will Hernandez did. So he's a guy I'm looking at that I guarantee he's not worth more than $5 million this year. Nobody's really talking about him. So
Wait, say that name again?
Tristan Colon.
Tristan Colon. Okay.
Yeah, for the Arizona Cardinals. So I like him. He's kind of like a depth piece. He's a guy that we're talking about potentially even next week, not as a priority right now, but I like him. And when we just look at the defensive line, I know the defensive tackle spot isn't really, a priority, but I think that the Bengals really should look at a Calais Campbell. And the reason why my mind goes to this is there's talks, right? Walter Nolan is the guy for the Bengals, right? There's talks that if they're going defensive tackle, it's likely Walter Nolan. I think if you add a Calais Campbell, I think it kind of saves you from having to do that, right? It gives you another year to develop Chris Jenkins. It gives you another year to develop McKinley Jackson, because I think Calais Campbell comes in and steps in right away and is the best defensive tackle on this team. And if you ask me, is Walter Nolan a can't miss prospect? Is he a guy that we just haven't seen? I personally don't think so. I think he's a great talent, but if you were to ask me who was a better pass rusher, him or Jerzon Newton, I'd take Jerzon Newton 10 times out of 10 as a pure pass rusher. If you ask me who's a better prospect coming out, him or Byron Murphy, I think it's close. So the Walter Nolan selection in round 1, if we're talking premium pick, I think you can save yourself of being forced to take a Walter Nolan if you add a Calais Campbell as a premium, as a free agent. I mean, it's after the first week. There's no real signs of the Miami Dolphins, making him a priority, or else they already would have. So I know he contemplated at the trade deadline last year. He said, hey, the Dolphins weren't doing well. And he said he had talks about potentially, a buyout so he could go play for a contender. But he said, hey, I agreed for a 1-year commitment with the Dolphins. I'm going to see this through. Sounds like he's going to play again. So he's not retiring. Like I said, I think it would save you from being forced to take a need in round 1. So I like Calais Campbell. He's one of my favorite names out there, Tristan Colon. And one last guy, like I said, I think that this is probably too premium on the pass rush side, but I think like Von Miller is the best pass rusher out there right now in free agency. And if I'm looking at, the older guys, if I'm looking at a 1-year deal, I think Von Miller is the guy that I would be willing to shell out money for. The rest of these guys, like an Azeez Ojulari, I like, but I don't know if I'm paying, $7-8 million. If the Bengals could get him on a $4 million deal for approve it, I would be a fan of that. And that's the position, edge rusher, pure pass rusher, I want / a defensive tackle that is a guy that can rush the passer. So those are the needs I kind of think that the Bengals should attack, as well as offensive line. So those are some of the guys I think.
This is from Jordan Schultz. He says, by extending Ja'marr Chase and Tee Higgins, the Bengals will actually lower both players' cap hits for this season. Higgins' cap number was over $26 million, and Chase was over $21 million. Both will now decrease, giving Cincinnati more flexibility continuing to build their roster. So I don't know the exact breakdown. I don't know the exact breakdown, but it seems as if, according to Jordan, I didn't realize, and this is going to be fascinating for me. That's why I love the offseason, because you learn all constantly. I didn't realize the 5th-year option. Obviously, you're getting paid. I think of that, like when you take the 5th-year option, you're getting paid like top premium of your position for that 1 year. But apparently it lowers it from. I didn't realize agreeing to a long-term extension, it lowers that premium as well, Daniel.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that he went out there and said that's a lot of people are kind of asking the question. At minimum, we know it's not getting worse. And I think that was the people's biggest fear is, well, they're in cap hell. They can't do this. They can't do that. That's something you can figure out down the line. But for this season, you're getting more money in your pockets this year. So I'm excited. And Malik, I think that's a good thing. And like I said, I'm curious to see what the exact number is. I know before that this was, announced, the Bengals were at $28 million in cap space, which was ranked around 18th in the league. So you still got 28 million. That's before potentially Zach Moss, before potentially Jermaine Pratt. So you have money to attack into your offensive line, and you have money to attack these other needs. So when we talk about building a contender for this season, you've got money to play with. You're not the Kansas City Chiefs right now. You're not the Philadelphia Eagles. You're not the Baltimore Ravens, who are strapped for cash this season. The Ravens have added 2 outside free agents, Malik. The Bengals have added 2 outside free agents. The difference is the Ravens have no more cap space. The Bengals got at least 28 and up now.
To go play with.
To go out there and play ball. And you hope that now that these 2 big deals are done, you do go out there and play ball. And you do go out there. And I think a realistic expectation, Malik, is you add a starting quality into your offensive lineman and you toy around with a pass rusher. I don't think that that's out of the realm of possibility, especially since you have $30 million in change. So I'm definitely a happy camper when it comes to looking at what the Bengals can do. Big Ugly Skeleton said lowered their cap hit. Yes, that is confirmed that this upcoming season they will have a lower cap hit. So
I'm looking at. You can keep going. I'm looking at this potential upcoming free some of the guys that are free agents that have not signed yet.
Yeah.
I've always felt like the Calais Campbell thing made a lot of sense, but I just never feel if they're gonna actually go into those waters because you had the opportunity to probably pick them up the last couple off seasons and you didn't make them a priority. Maybe this changes things to some degree. I have no idea. But I definitely think that, Tevin Jenkins obviously apparently taking his visit on the Seattle Seahawks today. We'll see if he leaves there with the deal. I know there were some conflicting reports out there that, hey, that the deal's done. It's not done. He's actually keeping his options open, and teams have, questions regarding his long-term injury history that he's had with from a back standpoint. I know he dealt with some calf issues as well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with a guy like Tevin Jenkins. Drop your questions down in the comment section if you can too. We've got over 330 people watching us live. We greatly appreciate you for tuning in at almost 1 a.m. We appreciate y'all, man. If you can give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live or upload content. Dan, you got any questions for me?
No, I mean, questions for you. I could think of some. I think that real quick, somebody's asking, what do you think Jermaine Pratt's market is? I realistically, people are asking for a 4th, 5th. I think that you'd be thankful that if you got a 6th round pick personally.
Yeah, I don't know if you're getting anything really of that's big enough to make you turn your head a little bit, of anything of significance. All draft picks are appreciated, of course, but you think about it, someone's gonna have to take on that salary, and that's just my thoughts. I don't know if there's any like real significant. I could tell you there hasn't been any real significant trade market for him, or else he'd probably be out of here already.
So yeah, I guess my question to you, and this is a question somebody else kind of posed, was how do you think, or Jim Gagner posed the question, he said, what type of message do you think that this sends to the AFC North? Feel like this is a power move. My question to you is just, what do you think teams view Tee Higgins, Ja'Marr Chase, and Joe Burrow? Do you think that they view that trio kind of like how fans view it? Like, holy crap, this is an unstoppable trio. Do you think that that's a realistic, thought that goes on in opposing teams? Like, do you think that teams are fearing this trio as much as we're making it out to be?
Yes, I think that there were teams salivating on the idea of Tee Higgins hitting free agency. One of those teams is in our division, and Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, once they realized T wasn't going to be a free agent, they shifted their attention to trade for DK Metcalf, and they realized they need to get the big body guy that they felt comfortable with, and that's who they traded for. They would have liked to have signed Tee Higgins to that deal. That was a guy that Mike Tomlin raved about. He was excited about. There are a lot of teams out there. There were teams that was ready for Mike Gesicki to get free agency, the Broncos being one of them. There were teams that were ready to poach some of these Bengals star players away from them offensively. And those things obviously didn't happen because the Bengals made it very clear, we want to keep Tee Higgins. We want to keep Mike Gesicki. But if those guys sniff free agency, I think they would have been scooped up. People could say all that they want regarding how they view this team, or T's not a true number one, but those teams would have been literally knocking down the door to grab those guys. So just my thoughts.
Yeah, we got some people asking kind of about free agency and guys that we'd be interested in. Question from Light Seeker, just kind of thoughts on Trent Brown. Obviously, he dealt with the injury. Do you guys think that Trent Brown is gone, or should the Bengals re-sign him?
I think if Trent Brown wants to continue his playing career, Cincinnati, he liked it in Cincinnati. He liked playing with Joe. He seemed motivated. I definitely think I kind of talked about it on State of the Jungle, or not our State of the Jungle. It was our show that we did Wednesday, which replaced State of the Jungle. I think that he would love to come back to Cincinnati if the opportunity presents itself. And I think he's a guy that's sitting out there that teams aren't necessarily knocking down the door to sign, especially coming off of the injury.
Yeah, for sure. People are asking about the safety position, right? Justin Simmons saying, should the Bengals attack safety? My thoughts personally, as we look at it, you have to look at the free safety spot for me, right? It seems like Jordan Battle, strong safety. He came on strong at the end of last year. I'm not bringing in a starting caliber strong safety. That's not what I'm doing. If you're entertaining the safety position, it goes one of two ways. It really is. You're bringing competition in for Geno Stone, a guy that isn't a clear-cut starting safety, or you're looking to the draft. I think the names like Justin Simmons is interesting. I just don't know if I do that because it seems like that would have been made a priority, right? If you bring in Justin Simmons, respectfully, you're cutting Geno Stone. That's at least what I would do. I'm not bringing Justin Simmons to sit on the bench behind Geno Stone. And I'm not letting Geno Stone sit behind both Battle and Justin Simmons for $7 million a year. So when it comes to Justin Simmons, it's an interesting name. I would just rather allocate that to the edge. But names like Julian Blackmon is interesting for the Colts, right? He was out there last year in free agency. He's here right now. He's a guy I could, be entertained. He is a free safety. He's a guy, he's played both strong and free, played free safety this year. He's kind of a guy that hasn't had a whole lot of ball production, but he's the pure athlete that Geno Stone, quite frankly, isn't. So when we talk about safety position, I think that it's not necessarily, it shouldn't be a priority. And I just look at these guys, whether it's in the draft or I like what they got with Jordan Battle, but I totally agree that there should be depth at the safety position. If not, Dejon Anthony's gonna have a big role because, knock on wood, you've got two starting caliber safeties, and the rest, respectfully, ain't doing it for me. So if they don't add anything, it must show that they've got confidence in Dejon, or they're looking to the draft. People are asking about Asante Samuel Jr. I'd still approve it at Asante Samuel before I go to safety. Asante Samuel is an interesting one. We've talked about him on the show. One of my favorite prospects coming out of the draft, a guy who hasn't had the best success with the Chargers, has an illness that's kind of plagued them this past season, but he's a guy who has potential to be a starting outside cornerback. So I like the idea of bringing Asante Samuel Jr. I like the idea of bringing in Kendall Fuller. The issue with that is it kind of muddies the water for these guys, right? Because Cam Taylor-Britt, Dax Hill, DJ Turner, those are kind of the three that you've got that should be deserving of starting, caliber, position. So the only way I would personally bring in an Asante or a Kendall Fuller is if these guys are on short, 1 year, $3 million deals. Let them compete. I'm all for that. But like I said, I think that the cornerback position should not be addressed before interior offensive line, or hell, even the defensive tackle or pass rusher spot. But we have some people who are asking still more about free agency. Legit E said, would the Bengals re-sign Mike Hilton?
No, I don't think that. I think that's, no, you never say never. If he sits out there for a long, long time, and his price obviously drives down. He was scheduled. I think there was expectations that he could have made up to $10 million. I don't know if that happens. I also just don't think it fits what Al Golden wants to do in his defense. Al Golden's defense strength is man-to-man coverage, and Mike Hilton's weakness is man-to-man coverage. To bring a guy back for one specific job, which is just to blitz, I think that going younger, and I think there'll be options in the draft, maybe even options that Al Golden is a little more familiar with.
For sure. Somebody, Night L, said, what about Tyson Anderson? Tyson Anderson, I think at this point is kind of just a depth piece. Like, he's been in the league for three or so years, and he's just a depth piece. He's not somebody that you rely on, at least at this point, to say, hey, you are our number 3 safety. If Geno Stone goes out, we're confident rolling out Tyson Anderson as our starting free safety to pair with a younger Jordan Battle. That's just not the way I would go about it. I think he's a guy where you've got him as your 4th, 5th safety. If there's injuries, let him come in there and compete. Let him come in there and earn a spot. Let him try to do that during training camp. I wouldn't personally rely on him as my number 3 safety. Your boy Bozo said Isaiah Simmons ? I think Simmons is too much of a tweener, in my opinion, to come in here.
He'd be fun.
He'd be fun.
But I thought that his life would have been much better as a pass rusher.
Yes.
They moved him to linebacker when he got to the league. Maybe if Isaiah Simmons commits to being a pass rusher, maybe he could be something. I think that's where a lot of people saw his true production being, and I think that there could be something special there.
And it's a difficult position to evaluate. And you hope that Al Golden, if they go the potential Isaiah Simmons route, you've got to have a specific role for him, because you've had guys like Jamin Davis, JOK. So many of these guys have came into the NFL as tweeners, and they haven't worked out. So if they bring in Isaiah Simmons, you've got to have a specific role for him. And Al Golden does like using three linebackers on the field. Bengal Kyle 513 said, what would you offer Trey Hendrickson?
I would offer Trey maybe like 27, 27, 28, something along those lines, and see if that gets the deal done. I know Trey wants to be here in Cincinnati. That's no secret. The goal was never for him to leave. The goal was always to be here. Does it make sense? We'll see.
Totally. And I'm with you there. I think that this team would be so much in a better spot if you have Trey Hendrickson on the team. And I don't think that when you look at the cap, once again, with how much he's already making and the fact that this wouldn't even go into action this season, it doesn't really hinder your team this year. So I think that it would be a failure if they can't agree to a deal. And especially at this point, if they can't agree to a deal, what's the next step, right? Is it trading him for a second? What's the next step? So it kind of muddies the water. You hope that they can keep the core together. We got a question here from David Gabbard. He said, looking back at the linebackers, is Devin White washed?
You know what's funny? 2 of the linebackers that the Bengals absolutely loved coming out of their respective drafts are both available.
Yeah.
And Devin White and Devin Bush. It makes me wonder. It just makes me wonder, right? Would the Bengals have any interest in going after either of those guys? Devin White is 27 years old. Devin Bush is 26 years old. Al Golden is truly the linebacker whisperer. He held that position linebackers coach when he was here in Cincinnati last time. He gets the most out of guys at that position. Those guys, I can't expect them to be anything relatively expensive. I know PFF is expecting Devin Bush to get a contract 2 years, $3.5 million. Devin White's value is so tanked that it don't even show what his value is be. I don't know what happened with Devin White. He was playing like a bat out of hell when he first came into the league. Somewhere along the lines that changed. I still think that there's still something there potentially with Devin White. I don't think you just forget how to play football, but I think being in the tumultuous situations that he has been in recently and how he was utilized probably is probably a clear representation of why his grades have been so poor, if you will. But Devin White is a guy that he has the speed. Can some team unlock it? I just don't know. That's just me. I don't think Devin Bush is that good is great in coverage, but I think he's a good run stuffer. But I know these are teams that the Bengals really, really like. These guys Bengals really like. So
Totally. And I'm a fan of Devin White as well. I think I'm not personally, there's a lot of these other guys that are out there, like a KJ Wright, for example. I think he was with the Dolphins, or just signed with the Dolphins. He's 35 years old, right?
Mhm.
I'm going after a guy, if it's the linebacker position in free agency, you want a guy who's kind of youthful, right? What's the point of getting rid of a Jermaine Pratt if you're going to go out there and sign a 33-year-old linebacker, 32-year-old linebacker? So I think that Devin White, is a former champion. He is a proven leader on a team, and he's a guy I personally would like, right? If it's not Devin White, I think you kind of just see what the situation is with Jermaine Pratt and potentially, just go maybe look to the draft. But I know that Oren Burks, after looking, watching his film and seeing what he's done with the Philadelphia Eagles, saw how he stepped in a big moment in the NFL playoffs this year against the Commanders, against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And that's a guy that could see 90% of snaps this year, could see 80% of snaps this year. And quite frankly, I wouldn't be upset about it. Despite him only making $2.5 million, that dude is a pro's pro. He is, well respected. We saw what the Eagles fans or teammates said as he left Philadelphia. The coaches loved him, players loved him. And like I said, he stepped in at the biggest moment and he had a lot of success last year. He was actually a top 15 graded, coverage linebacker when you look at, his entire season at the Philadelphia Eagles last year. So he's a guy I'm a fan of. And if we look at the linebacker position, I think, like you said, it's Devin White could be an interesting name where you kind of see what the situation is with Pratt and you go from there. We had a question. Tanner Bush asked about the draft. Would you guys consider a trade down in the first? I think it's always tricky if you're banking on a trade down. I think trade down is your last bet. Your trade down is if you've got 3 guys that you really like, or you think that there's value for 4 picks down the road, you go out there and do that. But most of the time, I personally prefer a trade up for a guy you absolutely love. But if you feel like, and if they feel like they're settling on a guy just because of need, that's when you trade down. If you feel like you've got Michael Williams on the board and you've got Malachi Starks and you've got Will Johnson, you don't know where you're leaning, that's when you trade down. But I always personally suggest you stick and pick or you potentially trade up.
Stick and pick. I like
Yeah.
that. Okay. Yeah. Stick and pick. Brought to you by Daniel Almeida.
That's funny.
Somebody asked about Tevin Jenkins. Listen, if I'm Tevin Jenkins, I think the question is the answer is very simple. Do you want to block for Sam Darnold or do you want to block for Joe Burrow? Listen, I understand it's enticing, Cooper Kupp and all these different pieces that the Seahawks are throwing at you, but to me, it's really not that difficult. You have the chance to be a part of one of the more prolific offenses, right? And I don't know. I don't want to keep going on and on about this, but I just think that the decision is not that insane because I also think that like his value could be improved much higher being in Cincinnati versus Seattle. Just my thoughts.
Yeah. And it depends on how much, right? The biggest thing is money. And you hope that the Bengals get close to what Seattle, it could be potentially offering because Seattle has a major need at interior offensive line. I'd arguably say theirs right now, when you stack it up, it's worse than the Bengals. And they've got a lot of money to play with. So I agree with you. You hope that if the question, honestly, for the Bengals shouldn't be if they trust, his back, as Chef said. Obviously, you want to see if he's got, if he's fully healthy. But when that dude was on the field, he is clearly the best option at interior offensive line right now because also the dude is young. And if it pans out well, you kind of hope that it follows a Mike Gesicki route to where, hey, you sign a guy in a short-term deal and you potentially get to reap the benefits of what that dude does. I believe Tevin's only 27, 20, 26, 27, 28. So he's definitely still young and he's definitely the better option than a Scherf because, Scherf's 33 years old. So it depends on, we'll see what Seattle, I believe what he's meeting with them Monday, tomorrow.
To meet him with them today. It's Monday. Well, it's not Monday in Seattle right now, but it's Monday here. So
this is
today. So we'll see what happens there.
James O'Hare, our guy, said,
hey, James, what's going on, man?
Thoughts on Julian Blackman? I know he had another question. I'll get to it in a second. Julian Blackman, the safety position, like I said, I think that if there's a safety you're going after, it could be Julian Blackman. He was on the market last year. the Colts kind of made their mark. Say, hey, we're bringing in Ashton Davis. We're bringing in. They brought in somebody else, and I like Blackman. I think Blackman is a safe option. I think he's a young option, and he's somebody where I look at, like I said, I'm not comparing him to Justin Simmons. Justin Simmons comes in right away and takes Geno Stone's spot if you sign him. That's the only reason I personally would sign a Justin Simmons. I think Blackman and Stone could give you a little rotation at the free safety position. I don't know if that's what the Bengals want. I'm personally a fan of him. Like I said, I was a fan of him coming out of Utah in the draft. I think he is a quality safety. I think that he's got a lot more speed than what Geno Stone's got. I don't know if he packs the punch that Geno Stone does in the run game. Geno Stone's highs are really high. We saw them multiple times. One of the crossing routes that Geno Stone absolutely blew up the wide receiver. But I like Julian Blackman. If there's a safety, it's Blackman, or honestly, I'm sitting back and I'm hoping that one of these guys available round 2, round 3, like, Malik's guy, Makubo, or potentially a Xavier Watts. Miss Paranormal said, "Is Orson not any good? Is Orrin not any good at linebacker?" No, he's very good, very
He's good.
solid.
Yeah, he's solid. He's solid option
From everything we've seen. So he's somebody that
I'll put
Bengals
it
fans
this
should
way.
be excited about.
And I mean this with no disrespect. If Al Golden can make Joe Bocci look the way he made him look, and I like Joe Bocci, Oren Burks is going to kill it in Al Golden's system. I believe that.
No, for sure. And even something I know that it's a niche name. I know I've talked about him a lot. I just went back and saw some clips from Shaka Hayward, man, and he's somebody where, and Malik, you brought up how the linebacker position is something that, specifically in the role, especially if you're playing alongside Logan Wilson, you're not going to be asked to do a whole lot, right? A lot of times these guys come in early downs and aren't asked to go out there and cover one-on-one with, a Travis Kelce, aren't asked to come out there. So if I've got a guy like Shaka Hayward, personally, I'm a big fan of him. I think that dude, we saw him at the end of the season. He barely played 20 snaps, but I am a huge fan of what that dude provides in the run game. He is one of the best downhill guys. When you look at his draft class, he was rated one of the best downhill linebackers in his class. So I'm a huge fan of him, and I know he's just a depth piece, but he's a guy where Bengals fans should hope to see his name in the preseason. And I'd be very confident that dude comes out in preseason, balls out, and hopefully he can earn himself a role with the Bengals if they don't go out there and add anybody else. King Blood 337 said, "Do we sign Jenkins and Scherf or Hernandez?" Those are the top 2 names. I think Jenkins or Scherf. Hernandez is a good one, but I think that it really is clear cut for me. Jenkins has got to be the priority, and then if not, Dalton Reisner probably would be my priority over Brandon Scherf, just because it gives you the age factor. You're not adding a 33-year-old offensive lineman. You're adding a guy who's got a lot of tread left on his tires. You're adding a guy who's just 29 years old. So I personally think it's hey, Tevin Jenkins is the priority. If not, shift your focus. Dalton Reisner, he's a guy where you just look at what he did with Minnesota last year, and he gave up 0 sacks. He was very productive for them, and he was asked to do a lot. They do a lot, especially in the run game. It's a weird system that Kevin O'Connell runs over there. So, like I said, I think that Dalton Reisner is a very, very, very fun name. Bengals Rick brought up the point, we will score 35 points a game. And I think that puts the interior offensive line as more of a focus. Hey, if you double down on offense, right? You say we're going to sign 2-star wide receivers. You bet your ass you better go out there and attack the interior offensive line. And it's not like we're asking or you're being forced to go out there and shell $30 million. You're not. You're asked to go out there and you've got the depth pieces. You've got your 2 bookend tackles. You've got your starting center. Go out there and get one of these interior offensive linemen. And you've got Cody Ford at depth. Maybe add another guy. So if you go out there and double down on offense, you bet your ass the smart move is to build the interior offensive line, because the number one way to screw over Tee Higgins, the number one way for this not to go well, is if your offensive line can't block, because we've seen it in the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl against the Philadelphia Eagles. We've seen it in the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We've seen it in the Denver Broncos game against the Carolina Panthers. A dominant defensive line will always wreck, a weak offensive line. If they don't attack the interior offensive line, we won't be having the conversation of Tee Higgins, Ja'Marr Chase. It's going to be the conversation of, damn, Joe Burrow getting hit over and over and over again. So you have to address the offensive line.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, yeah, keep going.
No, you're good. So somebody else.
All in Jay asked a question.
Yeah, All in Jay said, I'm looking for his question. Hey Malik, with the upcoming draft, if Walter Nolan or Mike Green is on the board, who are the Bengals more likely to draft?
I'm putting my flag down right now. I think the Bengals would draft Walter Nolan over Mike Green. And I think if James Pierce Jr. is on the board along with Walter Nolan, I think that they would probably draft James Pierce Jr. over Walter Nolan.
Yeah. And I think that that's realistic. I think when you just look at these guys as well, the issue with potentially drafting Mike Green obviously is the personal reasons, but it's also a change of philosophy when it comes to what you want as a pass rusher. It's also a bet on a guy who had dominant production for one season. It's a bet on a guy who was at a smaller school. There was a lot of questions around Mike Green. And when you look at round one, you don't always want to answer all the questions. I feel like the question guys are for the teams that are just confident. And it does not seem like the Bengals have been fully confident in going after that, especially in round one. So Mike Green is a guy that really has gotten a lot of hype. But to be honest, with the way that these teams have attacked free agency, I think that there's a world where this dude falls to late round one. So I think the Walter Nolan discussion as well. I know somebody said Kenneth Grant versus Walter Nolan. The discussion there is really you're betting on Trace with Kenneth Grant, and I just don't think that this Bengals team is in a spot to do that. I don't think that you're able to go out there and bet on Kenneth Grant to come in here and be a dominant nose tackle from day one and develop his pass rush. I just don't see it, right? You got TJ Slayton in there. And I don't think that this team is ready and is in a spot where they can wait for development from their first round pick. So I like Kenneth Grant. I think that he's got the size. I think he's got the build that you want. I think he's got the flash. But a lot of times this dude plays with a lot more finesse than oomph when it comes to his defensive tackle game. So I just don't know if Kenneth Grant would be the smart move versus Walter Nolan. It definitely seems like, hey, you can play that guy around and right away from day one, you're confident at least in his run game and he can develop as a pass rusher. But we had a question from Jim Gegner as a question. He said, as of right now, including these two extensions, how would you grade the Bengals free agency so far? And I can start this off. I think that I would grade this. I'd probably grade it I'd grade it a B right now. And this isn't to say I'm not excited about the Tee Higgins conversation, but there's still the unknown of Trey Hendrickson. There's still the unknown of the interior offensive line. So as of right now, it's looking up, and you have to be happy that they got Ja'Marr Chase and Tee Higgins done. But I think that these grades are very fluid. It's the same thing. A grade after free agency could drastically change after the draft. So I think the fact that they haven't addressed interior offensive line and they haven't gone out there and figured out the Trey Hendrickson situation kind of leaves a lot of room to be interpreted. I
agree with you. I think I graded a solid B, mainly because you keep the fold in the fold. you keep the locker room happy, and the morale is definitely high because it shows that you're willing to reward good play.
Totally. Tanner Bush, this is more NFL draft. He said, give me Derek Harmon over Kenneth Grant. I think if you're considering Derek Harmon, I think you got to be considering a trade back. And that's something that if you like Derek Harmon and Kenneth Grant, consider trade back to the mid to late 20s. But Derek Harmon at this point, he had 1 year of very, very, very good production as a pass rusher, but he's very raw. It's almost like, for me, I look at him as a guy kind of like a Deion Walker. Like, hey, there's a lot of question about Derek Harmon. He wasn't very good in the run game. He flashed. He couldn't finish plays. If I'm considering Derek Harmon at 17, I think that's a little too early because you're banking a lot on potential. But I think that there's a serious case for him late round one. He's definitely a fascinating pass rusher when it comes to the defense tackle spot. Jeff Huber said, I think B+. Remember, Henderson is still under contract.
That's fair. That's fair too.
Naughty 2 Slurp said, Malik, would you take a Luther Burden at pick 17?
Now, no, not with the circumstances. Now, I think that there should be some more pressing needs, I would say. I do think that I saw somebody talk about defensive draft. I do think that this draft could be shaping up to be really impactful defensive players, honestly, for the Bengals. Yeah, I still think that you could see maybe them leave this draft with a running back, maybe definitely an offensive lineman at some point in the draft. But ideally, you'd hope that the Bengals would have that position figured out to a degree long before the draft starts. You still got some options left on the board.
For sure. And Luther Burden is a fantastic wide receiver. There's a lot of questions about him. So if we're talking about the Bengals also, it's like you're drafting a round one guy to be a third wide receiver. And there is no other position on this team besides quarterback that you can say, hey, that position is locked up. You're not drafting a premium round one wide receiver now, because these two guys is not like he'll be T's replacement. No. Those guys are locked up for 4 years. So I'm personally not bringing in Luther Burden when you can use that fifth, year option as a value elsewhere. So Jim Gagner said, what does locking down their 2-star wide receivers now mean for the future of the Bengals run game / Chase Brown? When you look at the Bengals run game, it starts with the offensive line. If you build the offensive line, quite frankly, I don't have a lot of concerns about the run game. It doesn't matter who you really put in there in the backfield. They are going to have success because of these 2-star wide receivers, because of the quarterback that you have. So if you attack the offensive line right, if you go out there and get one of these top 3, Reisner or Jenkins, and you get some depth at the interior offensive line, I don't really have a lot of questions besides, hey, can they develop a more established run game late in games? When you've got the game at hand, can you develop it? So I don't know that this changes a whole lot about Chase Brown. What it would do is say, hey, you have to add somebody else besides Chase Brown. We saw many times last year where they were trying to wind down the clock and it just didn't work with Chase Brown. So in regards to building your roster, you need a backup plan, knock on wood, for a Chase Brown injury. So I would strongly suggest they go out there and add a running back in the draft. It's a very good running back draft class. So I would suggest going out there and doing that and getting a guy you can envision, to your point, hey, late in games when you're trying to wind down the clock, at the goal line, when you're trying to, punch the ball in. But I think that this shift also kind of signals that the Bengals are never really going to be this team where they're just going to run the ball down your throats on 3rd and short. They're not. They're a team with Zach Taylor at the helm. We've seen time and time again on 4th downs, throwing the wide receiver outs and doing these trick plays and kind of putting the ball in your best player's hands. So I don't know if this changes a whole lot when it comes to a philosophy. You hope that they develop the run game more, but like I said, I think that the strength of your offense, you're going to have to go, and I really think they're going to double down, especially since Tee Higgins was traded or is no longer traded, and he's still on this team.
I'm about to say what?
No, sorry, I know. But that's the only way you could say is, hey, are they going to be a more run-heavy team? No, I think that this team is going to put the ball in Joe Burrow's hands. Brian said Yoshi is the slot. Yoshi is a solid backup. He's a solid role player.
Yoshi is Yoshi.
Yes.
I would say that. I think Yoshi is Yoshi, and we're excited about Yoshi.
Completely.
And I answer that in the most Duke Tobin way. I think Mike Gesicki is the de facto slot receiver this year. I think that Yoshi will still get those minutes because we have that 4 wide receiver set basically. So you're definitely gonna see him out there. You could tell I'm watching a lot of NBA right now because I said the minutes. You got to get those minutes. So no, you're definitely gonna see Yoshi on a significant amount of snaps still this season because of the offense that the Bengals do run.
Completely. A couple quick run throughs from some of these running backs. Hunter Morse said, draft Scatterbo. I like Scatterbo. He's a do-it-all back. I wouldn't take him in round 2, though. I think the only way you entertain a Scatterbo is if he falls to round 3, potentially.
Yeah, that might be a little too rich, too. But.
Yeah. I like him. I think that Scatterbo is a do-it-all back, and he's a guy where what I saw, especially at ASU, they loaded the box for him, and he's not going to get that. He's one of the best receiving backs in this class as well. So I like him. And Caudo Ross said, Quinshon Judkins, personally, I'm a big fan of Travion Henderson. I don't think that's close. Travion Henderson fits the Bengals mold as well. I just doubt he's going to be there for the Bengals. I doubt he even makes it to 40 or 47 or wherever the Bengals are selecting.
Jim Gagner
49.
asked a question. Let's get to that.
His question was, Malik, with Tee Higgins now being the highest paid wide receiver 2 in NFL history, does this reset the wide receiver 2 market?
Oh, hell yeah. Let me tell you right now, teams in the NFL are pissed at the Bengals right now. They're mad. They're like, why would you pay your wide receiver 2 that type of money? Because now we have to pay our wide receiver 2 similar money, especially if they're looking at what Tee Higgins made in their salivating. The price has just gone up. And that's just how the NFL works. Your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 are going to be paid at premium positions because there's going to be times where your wide receiver 2 is going to have to play like your wide receiver 1, right? So you even look at the money that Devontae Adams got, going to LA, knowing that he is the wide receiver 2 or is expected to be with Puka Nacua now this being his team. So you look at it, man, of course, the price of wide receiver 2 has gone up significantly. And I'm sure many teams around the league are very, very upset today with the Bengals, but it's okay. The Bengals had to do what they had to do because the Bengals believe that not just any given day or any given Sunday or any given Thursday, or any given Monday, they believe that Tee Higgins is a wide receiver 1 and that they paid him like it. They backed it up with incentives. And they should have, obviously, because the concerns are valid, right? The concerns with can you stay healthy? All those things are valid, but this has got to feel good for Tee Higgins. It's got to feel good for the Bengals. It's got to feel good for the players in the locker room, realizing that they get to keep this strong core together for a while. So,
for sure. And like I said, teams may be pissed. It is what it is. Bengals got Tee Higgins, and it is what it is.
Somebody said, Hunter Moore said, I don't want to say somebody. Hunter Morse, we appreciate you. He's always in the comment section. He says, do you think the Steelers will let Pickens walk now with Metcalf there? No, I think they'd be smart to keep them both because they need all the help that they can get. I wouldn't even be surprised if Deontay Johnson returned there. But I say all that to say, I look at it and I say, the Steelers are probably looking at it like, damn, when the time comes, we're going to have to pay George Pickens a significant amount of money. And his contract's coming up sooner rather than later. And I don't even think they got the 5th-year option to work with him there because they drafted him in the 2nd round, right, Daniel? So that's a pick that's going to they're going to have to shell out a lot of money for George Pickens, even though I don't think he's necessarily as proven as some of these other guys. But you see the money that some of these guys are getting around the league, guys like Gabe Davis, they get $10 million a year, right? It's ridiculous. So,
yeah, and the Steelers are a weird team. They don't have a quarterback. They got Mason Rudolph, so they got to figure out the quarterback situation first. But David Gabbard said, sorry if I butchered the last name, do we draft a legit wide receiver 3 in this year's draft? No. I personally,
I would be shocked to see a wide receiver drafted this year by the Bengals.
Yeah, and when I look at it, like I said, you can't spend premium draft capital on a wide receiver right now. You just can't. And there's too much other value, defensive line, interior offensive line, cornerback, safety. You could go a lot of other ways. Running back, you go so many different ways. I just think that wide receiver is something you're confident who you got. Andre Yoshibas, like, I'm not taking a wide receiver in the first 4 rounds. I'm not. When you look at some other people that are kind of asking questions about free agency, somebody said, are there any surprise free agents you've heard the Bengals have interest in?
I've heard names out there, but you guys know how I do. I'm never going to be one of those people that just throw names out there just to keep you guys on the edge of your seat and asking about that. If it's anything significant, I'll definitely bring it up to you as well. But Michael Rolfe asked a question, Daniel, I thought was really significant that I think we should get to.
Yeah, he said
Malik and Daniel. It was Malik and Daniel dogs.
Yeah. He said, Malik and Daniel, I want a dog, slam dunk at 17. Nothing is promised with the draft, but who is a player, regardless of position, that you are the closest to being a successful lock at 17? He said for him, it's James Pierce Jr. I think that when you look at it, the 2 names I would probably say, first off, Ashton Jeanty gets there, it's Jeanty. And I don't think that's even close. He is a guy, running back position. He is going to be a top 10 running back in the NFL. But the rest of these guys, I think the only 2 guys I really look at that could potentially be available is, I'd probably say James Pierce Jr. and I'd probably say Will Johnson. Those are the two guys that I look at and say, hey, those are the safest and closest to just being a good player at the NFL level. Will Campbell's another one. I doubt he falls that far, but he's one where there's a lot of concerns about him, arm length, and there's questions. Hey, Armand Membu, is he going to jump him? Are the Patriots going to take him? If Will Campbell somehow falls, he's another guy that I say, hey, as an offensive lineman, I have no doubts that that guy is a successful NFL player. But I'd say Will Johnson and James Pierce Jr. are probably the closest to safest lock at 17.
Yeah, for me, slam dunk pick James Pierce Jr., Walter Nolan. Those are two guys. Obviously, Will Johnson's got to be excited about. I think you'd have to sell the Bengals on. You'd have to sell the Bengals on drafting another Michigan cornerback. Personally, I think that. Okay, can I give you guys a sad reality real quick?
Yeah.
This is just strictly my prediction based on just how the Bengals operate, how their MO is. And I hope I'm not trying to be any party pooper, and you can take what I'm saying with a grain of salt too. I respect everyone's opinion. I don't think the Bengals value the off-ball linebacker position like we think they do. The one guy that I saw them really, really ecstatic about was Logan Wilson. He was the one guy that they were really extremely pumped up about. And they were so excited about him that they were thinking about trading up in the back end of the second round to go out and get him. They loved him enough. They loved him so much. He was the most excited pick for them coming out of the draft class. And that was the same year they drafted Burrow, Tee Higgins.
Yep.
And they still did not move up to grab him. They still did not move up to grab him. When they nabbed him, they were excited. They were ecstatic. That's why you guys saw them extend him right away. Before it could even become a thing, they extended Logan Wilson. So they will extend guys, right, when they see the value there. Logan Wilson was the guy they were really, really excited about, and they did that. That all being said, I have not heard a lot of chatter on the Bengals and Ja'Marr Campbell or being in on Ja'Marr Campbell. I think that they believe that they need to. I think they value certain positions, especially in the first round they draft. Like, here's the thing: the Bengals loved. They liked Devin Bush. Who was the other linebacker that came out that year? Patrick Queen. They liked, and they just would not move. They knew that they had a massive need at linebacker. They would just not move on those guys. And part of that was too, they knew who they were getting. They were who they were hoping to get later in the draft. That all being said, man, the Cincinnati Bengals are a team where, it's like if they have to do it, they'll do it. But I feel like there's going to be much more premium positions staring them in the face that they'll probably pull the trigger on those guys versus drafting a Ja'Marr Campbell. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, a party pooper. It was the same. It's sort of how we always felt. It wouldn't shock me if Jack Kaiser was a pick later in the draft. But 100%, I believe the Cincinnati Bengals are going to wind up going after. I think the Bengals are going to wind up going after a linebacker maybe later in the draft. I do not expect Ja'Marr Campbell to be the Bengals pick at 17 though.
For sure. And I'll touch on that too as well. James O'Hara, we appreciate everybody. He said it's 1 a.m. and you guys are fielding the question from 300 plus awake viewers. Thanks for your dedication. We appreciate you. And just thanks to everybody watching, right? This goes to show the power of fan base, right? Especially after big news. So shout out to everybody. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. But thank you guys for tuning in. Malik, I agree with you. They haven't drafted a linebacker in round 1 since 2008. And
we saw how that panned out for them.
And
he actually was going to have a good year. It was Keith Rivers, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
He was having a standout rookie season until somebody by the name of Hines Ward probably committed one of the dirtiest blocks I've seen, broke his jaw. Keith Rivers was never the same again.
Yeah. And when you look at these other positions that they have valued, they valued so many of these other positions, whether, it'd be cornerback. I know they've taken Kirkpatrick, they took Denard, they took Leon Hall. They've taken a decent amount of
Jonathan
Joseph they took. So I know that's a position, and there's just a lot of value, especially at pass rusher for them to go.
Malachi Starks is an interesting name.
Yeah.
But I'll say this, the one thing that kind of always goes back to me is Malachi Starks did not look that great this season. He didn't find the ball a lot in the air. He seemed out of position, but the entire Georgia defense took a step back this year. So I don't want to put too much on him. Andrew Bakuba is my favorite safety, free safety
Yeah.
in this draft. Xavier Watts follows him. I've got to think Xavier Watts is a real position they're going to really a guy they're really going to take a look at probably in the second round. Um, I was very disappointed to see that they showed very little interest in Makuba. That was something that I did not see coming. But anyway, I digress on that. I think that the Cincinnati Bengals need to. I think they realize they need to fix the defensive line, and that's a position that they need to fix, and I expect them to do that. I do really think it's going to be very difficult for them to pass on Walter Nolan, Daniel. To be quite honest with you, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to pass on Walter Nolan. But then again, you're punting on the potential. You're punting. It means you're banking on the potential of Joseph Ossai to show more than what he showed off the 5.5 sacks. Are you saying basically Joseph Ossai had 5.5 sacks because maybe he was being held back the last couple of years? Maybe he built more confidence in himself. They were super excited about him last offseason going into this year. He really showed it the last 7 games of the season. Do you still believe in Myles Murphy? So you have allocated resources to that. Do you think the question you have to ask yourself is, do you think Myles Murphy has another gear? Do you think Myles Murphy has another gear? And if the answer is no, you probably run to the podium for defensive end. I like Nick Scorton too.
Yeah.
You want to talk about the one defensive end in this draft class that I think loves football out of every player? It's Nick Scorton. Nick Scorton, I think, absolutely loves football. I think he breathes football. His motor is insane. He plays like a bat out of hell. I think Nick Scorton is going to be a very, very good player for some team. So,
Yeah, and I like him too. And I think that you made a great point, especially with like a Walter Nolan. Like, especially for them to go after these other guys like a Mike Green or hell, even a James Pierce, it's out of the realm of what they normally do about these guys who don't weigh a lot. Like James Pierce, 245, his long arm, he can definitely fill out his frame. But every pass rusher that they've drafted has been 255 plus. So there is a possibility, and I know that they have a very clear need, whether Duke Tobin sees it or whether they don't, interior pass rush. And the question to be answered is, do they believe that Walter Nolan can develop into that? And if they do, then Walter Nolan should be in that conversation with James Pierce. Somebody asked about Nick Manwari. Does he have the Kyle Hamilton type of mold? I think he does, but the issue is just looking at their production and just looking at how they played. Hamilton was a far better college player than Nicky Manwari was. Nick played a lot of snaps. He played, in the box a lot 2 years ago, and this year he played a lot as a free safety as well. But just I don't like that pure comparison because Kyle Hamilton was far more productive. But Nicky Manwari, if you're looking at a safety, it definitely is intriguing. I just don't know if I value him more than a Malachi Starks. I understand the athletic numbers. I understand he was the highest graded RAS score out of any single safety that's ever participated in the NFL Combine. There's a lot more to football than just being athletic. And he's a very, very good safety. I also think that he will be gone by that time. I think a team like the Miami Dolphins could take him. So some people are asking about pass rushers. Yeah, Nick Scorton is definitely a dog. Tanner Bush said Texas A&M definitely messed them up. The thing about Scorton, he played at 280 pounds this year. That was confirmed. When you watch the tape, he looks 280 pounds. He looked strong. He didn't look as quick off the ball. But when you look at what he did the year before, because he just transferred from Purdue, he looked a lot faster at Purdue. And when you look at what he did at the NFL Combine, he weighed in at 25 pounds less, or I believe 15 to 25 pounds lighter than what he played at. He made it very clear, I can go from 250 to 280. Whatever you need me to do, I can do it. So I would take with what Nick Scorton did this season with a grain of salt because Texas A&M did have their guys play different. It is also why Ja'Marr Stewart didn't get as much production because they said, hey, you guys don't always put your head down and go. You've got 2 defensive tackles. They had Shamar Turner, one of the better defensive tackles in the nation. So they weren't just allowed to pin their ears back like a James Pierce Jr. was. So I like Nick Scorton. I think 17 is rich for him, but I definitely like him.
So my one of the last questions. I'm going to answer two more. I'm going to pick
Yep.
them out, Daniel. Sorry to late to the show. Might have asked this already, but do you think we have enough cap space to sign trade two guards, and how much cash do we have? No, we don't know the exact numbers on the cash that we have left, on the cap that we have left, but I do anticipate with those cap numbers being lower. I think they already had around 26, 27 million left. Anticipating both those deals kind of getting done. I do expect them to have money for Trey. Again, Trey's already under contract for the year, so it wouldn't really do much besides probably lower his cap for hit for this year. So they do have money for that. It's just a matter of how bad do they actually want to upgrade the guard spot, and what is their price range that they're looking to spend. If you're serious about really protecting Joe, you make sure you pull out all the stops, make sure Tevin Jenkins either doesn't take that visit or he signs, or he gives him something to think about. Hey, look, visit Cincinnati. We got some money for you. We want to make this thing a reality. And you got to think, if you're Tevin Jenkins, this is enticing, seeing what happens. And then you still got some more options out there. You got Sheriff, you got Dalton Reisner. So you've got some options. We'll see what happens there. Jim Gagner says, Malik and Daniel, is Duke Tobin now off the hook for his comments at the combine getting these deals done? Yes. But now the free agency now genuinely begins. You have to now upgrade the defense. You need to go out there, and there's a lot of names still sitting out there that could help your football team. And if you want to make sure that you're not kicking yourself come week 6, this is where it all starts right now. Malik, do these deals getting done solidify Joe Burrow's front office influence? Seems uncommon for a franchise quarterback to speak in deals into existence publicly. Remember anyone else doing this recently? This 100% tells you Joe Burrow's leading the charge here. I don't think the Tee Higgins deal gets done unless you I don't think the Tee Higgins deal gets done unless Joe Burrow actually speaks out and voices how big of a piece Tee Higgins or Mike Gesicki deal gets done. I don't think those deals get done unless Joe Burrow speaks out the way that he did for support of Mike Gesicki, for support of Tee Higgins. If you remember, even when I asked Duke Tobin the question at the combine about Mike Gesicki, his answer that he gave was, well, we've done a good job over the last couple of years getting tight ends paid. And Joe's done a good job with working with every tight end that we get in the building. But I'm not taking credit or anything like that for it, but I wanted to bring that question up because it's easy to kind of throw it under the bush and say, oh, well, Tee Higgins is a priority. Ja'Marr Chase is the priority. Mike Gesicki is, we'll see what happens. Because that was a real fear of mine. There was talks that Mike Gesicki might see what his market value might be because this is the first time he's entering free agency off of a great year. Well, luckily they got the deal done. They actually made him a priority. I was hoping that they didn't have a Hayden Hurst, CJ Uzomah situation on their hand again, even though I think Mike Gesicki clears both of those guys. It was important that they got the deal done. So, yeah, I do think that Joe Burrow's influence is huge.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to get some more. Tony Rose kind of said, do you think that they announced the signings tonight because of the Jenkins visit to Seattle tomorrow?
I don't think the Bengals expected them to announce the signings. And I think Jordan Schultz pulled a Jordan Schultz report. And I think that he spoke with Tee Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase himself and got the confirmation. I think the plan was for always Tom Pelissero and those guys to announce the deal. And, I think that he scooped him. Basically, That's what happened. I don't think that it was not on the radar for those deals to get announced tonight.
Yeah, and something that was fascinating. It makes you wonder, right? Like with that, like T and Ja'Marr both tweeted the same thing, so it shows that they were all in communication. Jordan, T, Ja'Marr. So it's just fascinating to see how that works out. And like you said, shout out to Jordan for that, because that's like, for them to both be on the same page, and it was very clear. Ja'Marr Chase doesn't use Twitter and use the same handshake emoji as Tee Higgins used. So it's like, shout out to them for getting done. And I think, like you said, it wasn't the Bengals that announced this. It was Jordan Schultz, Ja'Marr Chase, and Tee Higgins announced this. So Spirit of Whiskey said $70 million in remaining cap space means we can extend Trey and get Scherf and Jenkins if we want.
I'm not sure if 70 million is the number at all. But we gotta wait till the actual numbers break through. Yeah, so it'll be interesting. But Daniel, any last thoughts before we head out of here, man?
Man, I'm just happy. And last thoughts are the fun starts. Go out there and attack this week, Bengals. Go out there and attack this week, and the next 2 weeks
Yeah.
or the next 2 months really can shape how your football team looks, and I'm excited for it.
So Jim Gegner asked me a quick question. I want to get out of here before we do. He says, uh, Malik, a little bit of an outsider question. When it comes to your getting information, how careful do you have to be before you break it? What's your process? So I have 4 people that I confirm with before I even put anything out. I have my sources have gone from the 4 people that I trust within that building to relationship with players over the last couple of years. That's not something that I expected, but it is something that has happened. I typically like to cross reference, double check, and ask concrete stuff before I put it out there. It's like when the whole Trey Hendrickson Eagles thing, the first thing I did is I called one of my contacts who works very closely with the Philadelphia Eagles, and he is the person who told me about the AJ Brown signing coming to Tennessee and all that kind of stuff like that, and Julio Jones signing there. I checked in with him. He said the Eagles have had no conversations about trading for Trey Hendrickson. So that was false. Um, I like to pretty much just to cross-reference to make sure that I cross my T's and dot my I's. On occasions, I get asked not to say certain stuff and just wait, because sometimes there are too many, how do I say it? There are only a small amount of people who know within the building. And if you break news that you've been given, it'll kind of put that person or those 4 people or those 5 people on the hot seat, because it's like, well, only blah, 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 and this person knew, right? So how did that information get out? So you try to protect relationships. You don't try to be the first to report a story always. You just want to be the person that gets it correct. Um, as with everything, if you guys don't hear me speak, um, it's because typically there's nothing of substance to say, and if there is something of substance, I was probably told not to say something. I do not want to bring you guys along by putting eye emojis out there, certain stuff like that. At the end of the day, I want to make sure that I do right by everyone when you guys see me break news. And if you're always gonna get people who say you're a fraud, you're not real, and all that kind of stuff like that. And that's fine. It comes with the territory. You're only as good as the last story that you broke. You got to just keep grinding, keep your head down, and not look for approval by anyone. But Jim, that's pretty much my process. It's always ever changing. You go to these different events, the combine, all, and you have different discussions. You never know who you're going to meet, and you never know what the different conversations are like. Somebody said, "Where does Josina fall in the pecking order?" Josina and me are very close friends. Um, love her like a sister, and always show me a lot of respect. Mike Garofalo always showed me a lot of respect. We have DMs back and forth and stuff like that. So I always appreciate those people for treat me with the most kindness. Even Jordan Schultz always treated me with the most respect and utmost kindness. So I appreciate it. I really do appreciate everything. And I appreciate that you guys are tuning into this live at 1 a.m., 1:19 a.m., hearing me talk about how I break news and how I get sources and stuff like that. I appreciate y'all. I really, really do. Listen, it's getting late. Daniel's tired. I'm somewhat tired. But we appreciate y'all so much, man. We really do appreciate y'all. And we hope that you guys give this video a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and turn on post notifications so you guys don't miss when we go live. I know free agency frenzy is over, but it's not over necessarily for the Bengals. So we will be live for any major breaking signings the Bengals have, and we'll be talking them all through with you guys. We hope that you guys have a great night. And remember, there's only one way you should be waking up, or as you're about to now go to sleep, and watching your sports content, and that is the right way. We appreciate you.
All they ever do is